There is a car. That is where this case lives right now. Not in a courtroom, not in a press conference, not in any official statement that has been issued in the past 38 days. In a single vehicle captured on a Ring camera 2.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home at 2:36 in the morning. Her pacemaker disconnected at 2:28. The drive between those 2 points takes exactly 6 minutes. The Pima County Sheriff confirmed the timing matches the investigative timeline. The FBI confirmed it too. And then came silence. Complete, deliberate, prosecutorial silence. The FBI has 10,000 hours of footage. They have cell tower records. They have license plate data from the night Nancy Guthrie was taken. And they have made 0 public statements about that car. Not one word. Not one press conference. Not one leak to any outlet covering this case. 0. Here is what you need to understand about that silence. The FBI does not go quiet around evidence it does not have. The FBI goes quiet around evidence it is protecting. Around evidence so precise, so directly connected to a specific name, that saying one word publicly could compromise the prosecution they are quietly and methodically building around it. That prosecution is already being prepared. The evidence makes that clear. Right now, before we go 1 second further into what that car means and where it leads, hit that like button. Share this video with every single person you know who is following this case. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell right now because when the FBI moves on this case, this channel is where it posts first. You cannot afford to miss that moment. Now let us talk about the car. The math is where you have to start. Because the math is what makes this evidence impossible to explain away, impossible to dismiss, and impossible to argue against in any courtroom in this country. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker application disconnected from her phone at 2:28 in the morning on February 1st, 2026. That disconnection is the forensic marker for the exact moment she was separated from her device. 3 scenarios explain that disconnection. The phone was moved beyond Bluetooth range. The device was manually disabled, or she was physically carried beyond the signal threshold of her own home network. All 3 scenarios require the same thing. She was being moved. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie was in motion. A car appeared on the Stratagula family's Ring camera on Camino Royale at 2:36 in the morning. Camino Royale sits 2.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's residence in the Catalina foothills. NBC correspondent Liz Kreutz drove that route herself. She chose the path deliberately, avoiding major intersections, selecting the back road corridor a driver would instinctively take at 2:30 in the morning when the objective is to move quickly and quietly without attracting a single second look from anyone. That drive took 6 minutes. 2:28 in the morning plus 6 minutes equals 2:34 in the morning. The car appeared at 2:36. 2 minutes of margin. Now understand what those 2 minutes actually represent. That is not a discrepancy. That is not a gap in the timeline that weakens the evidence. That is the 2 minutes a driver spends at the end of Nancy Guthrie's street checking mirrors, removing a mask, confirming the road ahead is clear, slowing their breathing, composing themselves before accelerating onto a back road at a speed that would not draw a second look from any passing car or any camera they had not already accounted for. 2 minutes is the behavioral signature of someone transitioning from operational mode to exit mode. Someone shifting from the person who walked onto that porch in darkness to the person who needed to look completely ordinary driving away from it. That psychological shift takes time. 2 minutes is exactly how long it takes. The Pima County Sheriff confirmed publicly that the timing of that vehicle matches the investigative timeline. That confirmation is not a theory. It is not the analysis of a true crime commentator or an armchair investigator. It is the official, documented, on-the-record position of the lead agency on this case. The car was there. The timing matches. The sheriff said so on record. Now examine the vehicle itself because the vehicle is a choice and choices tell you who made them. Retired NYPD Detective Pat Broen reviewed the Ring camera footage and identified the vehicle as a Kia Soul. A compact crossover. Common. Quiet. Forgettable. The kind of car that exists in every neighborhood in America, parked in every driveway, pulling out of every grocery store lot. The kind of vehicle a sleepless neighbor looks at from a window at 2:30 in the morning and does not register, because there is nothing about it that demands to be registered. Nothing that says pull out your phone. Nothing that says remember this plate. Nothing at all. That invisibility was not accidental. It was a design choice. And design choices always reveal the designer. A Kia Soul is not selected for cargo capacity. It is not the vehicle you choose if the primary concern is how much physical space you have available. It is the vehicle you choose if the primary concern is not being remembered, not being noticed, not being the car that a neighbor later describes to a detective with any level of confidence or specificity. But here is what investigators also know about a Kia Soul. With the rear seats folded, the cargo area is adequate for transporting a person of limited mobility if that person is not being transported vertically. Former FBI agent and forensic analyst Tracy Walder assessed the contents of the suspect's backpack as consistent with a transport kit. Not robbery tools. Not the equipment of someone who came to take valuables. Zip ties. Tape. Materials for physical control and containment. Transport tools. The tools of someone who came specifically to move a person. A Kia Soul with a folded rear seat. A transport kit in the backpack of a figure whose FBI measured height places them between 5 feet 9 and 5 feet 10. That combination does not describe a spontaneous crime of opportunity. That describes a planned, researched, rehearsed operation in which every detail was chosen in advance, including the car that would carry Nancy Guthrie away from the home she had lived in for 5 decades. The route that vehicle took carries its own intelligence, and that intelligence points in specific directions toward specific names. Camino Royale feeds directly into East River Road, a secondary artery running east to west along the northern edge of Tucson. From East River Road, the driver had 4 directions open immediately. South on Oracle Road toward the city center and Interstate 19 toward the Mexican border 60 miles away in Rio Rico. West on Campbell Avenue through residential corridors toward the part of Tucson where a man named Dominic Evans lives and works. North toward Oro Valley, the suburb where a man named Tommaso Cioni teaches AP Biology at Basis Oro Valley, and where he and Annie Guthrie maintain their family residence. East into open desert, sparse residential density, dry washes, and trailheads where former Nassau County Lieutenant Michael Gould assessed that a body could remain undiscovered for months within a 2 to 5 mile radius of Nancy Guthrie's home. Each direction is a theory. Each direction connects to a name. Each direction was available to the driver of that car at 2:36 in the morning on February 1st, 2026. The FBI knows which direction that car was traveling. They have 10,000 hours of footage. They have license plate readers positioned along every major corridor in that part of Tucson. They have cell tower triangulation data that can place a specific device at a specific location within meters. They know exactly where that car went after it passed the Stratagula family's ring camera. They have not disclosed it. And that silence is deliberate. Deliberate silence from federal investigators in an active case like this means one of exactly 2 things. They do not want the driver to know they have this footage at all, or they do not want the driver to know they have already identified exactly where that car went and who was behind the wheel when it got there. Either way, understand this clearly. The FBI is not confused about this car. The FBI is not still processing this footage trying to figure out what it shows. The FBI is building a case around it. And the silence you are hearing from federal investigators right now is not the sound of an investigation that has stalled. It is the sound of a prosecution that is almost ready. There is a specific category of evidence that investigators call a behavioral artifact. It is distinct from DNA, distinct from camera footage, distinct from digital records, because it does not require a laboratory to process or a subpoena to obtain. It exists in plain sight, visible to anyone who knows what they are looking at. A behavioral artifact is the pattern of what a person does, what vehicle they drive, what routes they take, what times they move through a neighborhood, what choices they make when they believe no one is watching. Behavioral artifacts accumulated across multiple dates and multiple observations build a portrait that is extraordinarily difficult to challenge in a courtroom, because it is not constructed from a single moment that a defense attorney can attack or explain away. It is constructed from a history, from a documented record of choices that individually mean nothing, but together mean everything. The car captured on that ring camera at 2:36 in the morning is a behavioral artifact, not because of what it is, because of where it was, because of when it was there, because of the route it was traveling, and because of who, in the documented network of people connected to this case. drives a vehicle matching that description through that specific corridor at that specific hour of the morning. Two men sit at the center of that corridor. Tommaso Cioni and Dominic Evans. One man who dropped Nancy Guthrie at her front door 4 hours before she vanished and has not spoken a single public word in 38 days. One man whose physical measurements fall precisely inside the FBI's established range and who investigators have never formally ruled out. Both men connected by 19 years of documented friendship that began with a single classified ad in 2007. Both men connected to the same vehicle corridor. Both men maintaining a silence that behavioral analysts describe as entirely consistent with the advice of legal counsel. The car is where this begins. These two names are where it leads. Tommaso Cioni dropped Nancy Guthrie at her home at 9:48 in the evening on January 31, 2026. The garage door closed at 9:50. He waited until she was inside before pulling away. He was the last confirmed person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. The doorbell camera was interfered with at 1:47 in the morning. That is a gap of 3 hours and 57 minutes between Cioni pulling away from that curb and an unidentified masked figure approaching Nancy Guthrie's front door in complete darkness. 3 hours and 57 minutes is the operative window that investigators have examined from the very beginning of this case. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos publicly confirmed that Guthrie family members and their spouses, including Cioni, have been cleared. That statement is on record. It is documented. It is official. But cleared in a press release and cleared in a federal investigation are not the same thing. They are not even close to the same thing. Cleared means the current evidence does not support charges at this specific moment in time. It does not mean the window of investigation has closed. It does not mean new forensic data cannot reframe that position entirely. Evidence in an active investigation is not static. It moves. It builds. It accumulates. And the investigation into this case has not stopped moving for a single day since February 1st. The FBI returned to search Annie and Cioni's home 5 separate times. 5. Law enforcement does not send agents back to a residence 5 times for courtesy calls or routine follow-up conversations. Each return represents a specific evidentiary objective that the previous visit did not fully resolve. 5 visits to the same property across an active federal investigation is a documented pattern of sustained investigative interest that the Pima County Sheriff's Department has never publicly explained. Now examine the behavior. Because behavior in the aftermath of a violent crime against a family member is itself a form of evidence. Savannah Guthrie posted multiple emotional public videos. Cameron Guthrie spoke directly to the kidnapper on camera. Annie Guthrie cooperated so fully that investigators searched her property, took her vehicle, and held it in a forensic evidence lot for weeks after a public clearance was issued. The family was visible, vocal, urgent, frantic in the way that innocent people are frantic when someone they love has been taken. Cioni produced nothing. Not one statement. Not one appearance beside Annie during any public plea for his mother-in-law's safe return. Not one word directed at whoever took her. Not one moment in front of a camera in 38 days of wall-to-wall national media coverage of the disappearance of his wife's mother. 38 days of complete unbroken silence in a case of this magnitude is not a personality trait. It is not shyness. It is a decision made deliberately and consciously every single morning for 38 consecutive mornings, because every word spoken publicly is a potential liability when legal exposure exists. Behavioral analysts who study innocent family members in kidnapping cases describe them consistently as frantic, visible, and urgent. They cannot stop talking because talking feels like doing something. Participants with legal exposure cooperate precisely where they must and maintain silence everywhere else, because their attorneys have made clear that silence is the only position that does not create new problems. Now layer the physical description onto that silence. The FBI's forensic unit erected a white tint over Nancy Guthrie's front entrance to replicate the exact nighttime lighting conditions of February 1st. Agents dressed in replica clothing and ran measurements under infrared. The result was unambiguous. The subject on that porch is between 5 feet 9 and 5 feet 10 inches tall. Average build. Multiple investigative journalists who analyzed photographs of Cioni standing next to individuals of publicly known height placed him consistently near 6 feet tall. Some assessments placed him at 183 centimeters. The math does not close. If the figure on that porch is 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 and Cioni stands near 6 feet, Cioni is not the figure on that porch. That is not exoneration. That is a measurement. And measurements in a criminal investigation do not close questions. They open new ones. Specifically, if Cioni is not the figure on that porch, who in his immediate documented network has the right height, the right build, the right physical profile to be the person the FBI has been measuring frame by frame in recovered camera footage since the first week of this investigation? That question leads directly and specifically to one name. Dominic Evans entered the public conversation on February 4, 2026, when court records from the Pima County system showed a criminal history attached to his name. Multiple outlets independently verified the charges: felony burglary, robbery, theft, embezzlement, driving under the influence. Evans gave one interview. On February 25th, he sat with the New York Times. He stated he had met Nancy Guthrie exactly once, at an Easter gathering in 2011. Investigators interviewed him for approximately 40 minutes 1 week into the case, and had not contacted him again as of the time of his interview. His alibi was home with his wife and children on the night of January 31st into February 1st. His wife corroborated the account. Phone data supported it. Sheriff Nanos expressed sympathy toward Evans publicly and suggested he consider legal action against those making unverified claims. Evans has not been named as a suspect, charged, or arrested in connection with this case. What exists is the physical description and the documented record and the question of what 19 years of proximity actually produces. The FBI established the masked figure as a male between 5 feet 9 and 5 feet 10 inches tall. Average build. Dark facial hair visible beneath the mask. Former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clementi identified what appeared to be a marking on the subject's right wrist in the infrared footage, possibly a tattoo. His assessment was precise. If confirmed, that single marker could help investigators rule individuals directly into or out of the suspect pool entirely. One marking on one wrist narrows the field from millions to a handful. Evans's documented height is consistent with the FBI's established range. His build is consistent with the description. The facial hair characteristic is consistent with the public photographic record. He lives in Tucson, and his criminal history includes burglary, defined under Arizona law as entering or remaining unlawfully in a structure with the intent to commit a felony inside. The legal definition of burglary and the behavioral observation captured on Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera describe the same action. A figure moving through a gated entrance without visible forced entry. Navigating a private residential property with the quiet confidence of someone for whom the geometry of that space was not unfamiliar. Someone who moved without hesitation in the dark. Now place Evans inside the relationship that connects him to every other piece of this evidence. In April 2007, he met Cioni through a Tucson weekly classified ad. They formed a band. They recorded together. They performed together. They maintained that friendship for 19 years without interruption. For every single one of those 19 years, Cioni was already married to Annie Guthrie. Every rehearsal between Evans and Cioni happened in the context of Cioni's marriage to Nancy Guthrie's daughter. Every road trip, every late-night conversation, every ordinary moment of a 19-year friendship happened while Cioni was the son-in-law of an 84-year-old woman living alone in the Catalina foothills. Proximity over 19 years means information moves through ordinary conversation the way water finds a crack in concrete. It does not require a specific conversation about security systems, or addresses, or medication schedules. It requires only the accumulation of ordinary detail over nearly 2 decades of close friendship. Her address, her daily routine, her physical limitations, her pacemaker, when the neighborhood goes dark, when the street is completely quiet, when no one is watching. Evans confirmed he met Nancy Guthrie exactly once. The question investigators are not asking is how many times Evans met Nancy. The question they are asking is how much Evans knew about her, absorbed through 19 years of ordinary proximity to the man who drove her home 4 hours before she vanished. Return to the vehicle because the vehicle is a decision and decisions leave traces. The car is a specific decision made by someone who knew this neighborhood, knew this route, knew the back roads between the Catalina foothills and the arterial roads leading out of northern Tucson. That knowledge is not available on a map application. You cannot search it. You cannot find it by looking at a satellite image. It belongs to someone who has physically driven those roads before at night, who knows which intersections have cameras and which ones do not, who knows which back road gets you from the Catalina foothills to the highway without passing through a single intersection that a detective would later pull footage from. Cioni lives in Oro Valley, accessible from Camino Royale heading north. He drove between his home and Nancy Guthrie's residence on known dates, including the night of January 31st. He knows that route. He has driven it in daylight and in darkness. Evans lives in the Tucson corridor, accessible heading west from the same East River Road that Camino Royale feeds into. Both men's geographic positions are directly accessible from the same route that car traveled at 2:36 in the morning. Both men are connected to the same 19-year friendship. Both men are connected to the last confirmed location of Nancy Guthrie on the last confirmed night she was seen alive. The DNA narrows this further and in a direction that the investigation has been building toward since the first week. Two profiles exist in this case. One came from a glove found 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's residence, a glove the FBI described as visually consistent with the gloves worn by the masked suspect on the doorbell footage. Preliminary DNA testing returned an unknown male profile. That profile was submitted to CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system containing genetic records for convicted offenders across the country. No match returned. But a no match in CODIS does not mean the DNA belongs to no one. It means the DNA does not belong to anyone whose genetic material was entered into that specific database through prior contact with the criminal justice system. It tells investigators nothing about people who have never been entered into that system. Nothing at all. Investigative genetic genealogy is now running on that glove profile through Parabon Nanolabs, the same laboratory whose methodology identified the Golden State Killer after 40 years of failure through traditional methods and placed Brian Kohberger at the Idaho crime scene when nothing else could. The process requires only one relative, one distant cousin, one aunt, one second cousin who uploaded their DNA to a commercial genealogy platform. From that single relative, genealogists build outward through family trees, narrowing from thousands of potential matches to hundreds to dozens to a handful to one specific individual whose age, gender, and geographic location align precisely with every other piece of evidence already assembled in the investigation. The probability that both DNA contributors in this case have kept their entire extended families completely out of every genealogy platform that exists approaches zero. The tree is being built. Right now. Silently. Without press conferences. Without announcements. Without anyone outside of that laboratory and the federal investigation knowing how close it is to producing a name. Arizona mandates DNA collection upon conviction of qualifying felony offenses. Burglary qualifies. If Evans's documented felony conviction produced a sample in the Arizona state database, that profile has already been directly compared against the glove DNA. If it did not match, investigators already know Evans did not leave that glove at that location. If it did match, what follows from that result is not complicated. The second profile, the mixed biological material recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home, is still being processed in a private laboratory in Florida. Once that mixture is separated and the individual profiles are extracted, each one will be run through every available database simultaneously. CODIS, the Arizona state system, and the commercial genealogy platforms where the answer to this entire case almost certainly already exists, waiting to be found by a scientist running a search that the people who left that genetic material never imagined would be possible. That process runs silently. It does not announce itself. It delivers a name. And when it does, the distance between the car at 2:36 in the morning and the name on the registration of that vehicle collapses in a single moment that no public statement and no 38 days of silence can undo. There is one more piece of evidence that investigators themselves have described as a missing piece in this case. Not missing as in absent. Missing as in the final piece that completes the picture. The suspect's cell phone. Every modern cell phone communicates passively and continuously with the nearest cell tower, whether the owner is making a call, browsing the internet, or doing absolutely nothing with the device. That passive communication creates a time-stamped geographic record that is stored automatically on carrier servers and that federal investigators can access with a court order. That record places a specific device at a specific location. Not approximately. Precisely. Cell tower triangulation combined with historical location data from a carrier's records can establish the physical position of a device within a range of meters. Sheriff Nanos confirmed on record that the cell tower data has already helped eliminate people from the investigation and examine specific threads. He also confirmed there is still significant data in that dataset that has not yet been fully processed. Significant is the word he chose. Not routine. Not standard. Significant. If a cell phone was active in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood and moving from Nancy Guthrie Street toward Camino Royale between 2:28 and 2:36 in the morning on February 1st, that movement is recorded in the carrier's servers right now. It was captured automatically. It cannot be deleted retroactively. It cannot be explained away by a press conference. It cannot be neutralized by 38 days of public silence. If that device belongs to a registered account, that account connects to a name. And that name, combined with the Ring camera footage, the license plate data, the DNA processing, and the genealogy tree currently being built branch by branch in a forensic laboratory, creates a convergence of evidence that a jury does not need a law degree to understand. $1 million is sitting on a table right now. Cash. Anonymous. No questions asked. The Guthrie family made that commitment publicly, and they have the resources and the motivation to honor it completely. $1 million is a number that changes the mathematics of loyalty. Every person who is currently calculating whether their silence is worth more than that reward. Every person who knows something about what happened on the night of January 31st, who saw something, who was told something, who was asked to help with something and said yes or said nothing, is doing that calculation at this very moment. That calculation always resolves. Not immediately, not cleanly, but eventually, because silence is not permanent and loyalty under pressure is not permanent. Forensic evidence, however, is permanent. The car at 2:36 was on camera. The DNA is in a laboratory. The cell tower logs are in a federal evidence file. The genealogy tree is being assembled, and the name waiting at the end of that tree will be found whether the people who placed it there cooperate or not. She is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker. She depends on daily medication to stay alive. She has been gone from the home she lived in for 5 decades for 38 days. She was targeted specifically, studied carefully, and moved through a locked gate in 41 minutes of complete darkness by at least 2 individuals who left their genetic material inside her home and on the road as they drove away from it. She is not a headline. She is Nancy Ellen Guthrie, a woman who went back to work at 47 years old after her husband died suddenly so that her children could go to college, who spent 17 years in a job she did not need for herself so that she could build a future for them with her own hands, who described Tucson as wonderful just 3 months before someone took her from it. She deserves to be found. The evidence knows where she is. The investigation is closing the distance between that Ring camera footage and the name on the registration of a specific vehicle on a specific back road at 2:36 in the morning. When that distance closes, when the car and the DNA and the cell records and the genealogy tree all converge on the same name at the same moment, the silence that has lasted 38 days will end. Not because someone chose to speak, because the evidence made speech irrelevant. If you have information about what happened to Nancy Guthrie, about where she is, about who was responsible for removing her from her home, about the car that traveled that corridor in the dark, call the Pima County Sheriff tip line at 520-351-4900, or call the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI. $1 million. Cash. Anonymous. No questions asked. Drop your city in the comments right now. Tell us where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there. This community has been ahead of this investigation from the beginning, and the more eyes on this evidence, the harder it becomes for whoever did this to stay invisible. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. The next video on this case goes live the moment a suspect is publicly named or the DNA results land. You cannot afford to miss it. Share this with everyone tracking this case. The car appeared at 2:36. The pacemaker disconnected at 2:28. The drive takes 6 minutes. The sheriff confirmed the match. The FBI is silent. And the FBI does not go silent around evidence it does not have. This is not over. We are not stopping. Not until Nancy Guthrie comes home.